You're watching Business Unusual here on Newsroom Africa, channel 405. It's Startup Monday, and today we're going to be taking a look at whether or not incubation of early stage enterprises actually works. For this conversation, I'm joined in studio by Shawn Theunissen. He's the founder of Property Point, and also joined by Mpumi Maesela, country director at Camp Sizanni Life Skills. Mpumi and Mr. Theunissen, good afternoon to the pair of you, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we maybe, Mpumi, start, I guess, with what incubation is? Because I think in many instances we've heard this term bandied about quite often, and we seldom, I guess, get to the nub of what it actually involves. What is incubation?
I'm going to bring it back to basic and to agri. Think about the life cycle of a butterfly. When the butterfly is on the cocoon, that butterfly is about
This is before it just sort of goes out and flaps its wings.
Yes. So bringing it back to small business, it's when you've crystallized your business idea and needing to understand either your market better or understand the technicability of the whatever product or service you want to take. And so you're needing either to be market ready or be funding ready.
Okay.
And so you will be exposed to an incubator that helps you come out being market ready or being funding ready.
Can it be both?
It can be both. Can be both.
Okay. Shawn, let me bring you in here. I mean, you guys are in the property space, but you work with enterprises across that entire value chain. And
correct.
Everybody who services that space. From the description Paul has given, one would think that the process would be different for businesses at different stages of their development and businesses working in different sectors. What are some of the things that you have seen that have worked and maybe have failed in how many of the people you interact with have been incubated?
Yeah, so I think that if we look at Property Point, so Property Point's been around for about 12 years now. Many lessons learned in terms of the incubation of businesses. And I think very much the fact that when we look at the South African context, we want to be able to work with businesses that are ready to access market opportunities and that are also bankable. And I think that one of the things that we've seen is that we've taken a deliberate approach to become sector specific. And I think in order to be able to really create deep-rootedness in terms of businesses working within a specific sector. So typically when you look at incubation models, there's either going to be generic models that works with businesses across the board, or you're going to have sector-specific models. I think that for us, the key focus has always been we want to be able to support the businesses in terms of the necessary capacity building that they need in order to get systems, processes, thinking right within the business, formulate the strategy. But then you also want to make sure that they focus on getting market access. So how do you ready them for a specific market?
Sure. And
then thirdly is to focus on the bankability of those businesses. And if you're able to focus on those three components, your successes in the market will be greater. But I think that there's a lot of more complexity that comes into incubation. Yeah.
And I mean, Shawn, for me, I'm also quite interested in what happens pre and post, right? It's quite clear for me on the pre side of things that you would have a very extensive vetting process that filters through some of these businesses so that you can get the ones who can benefit the most from the process.
Yes.
What happens after the incubation process?
So I think that, so if we look at the South African scenario, typically what you have is that you would have incubators that also incubate businesses to a specific period of time. And then you have, I think some of the practices that we've seen in the market is that small businesses have started going from one incubator to the next incubator.
So hopping
into programs. So what we've done from a Property Point perspective in terms of a case study was that really saying that you want to be able to support that business throughout their life cycle of growth. And at every stage of growth, they have a different need. So we work with a business, and once they've graduated out of our incubator process, we actually have what we refer to as an alumni program, which is typically like a post-incubation program, where you're able to create a demand-led model for the business. So when they have support that's needed, they're able to engage in the business. So ideally, every business that goes through an incubator or an accelerator program should ideally be able to start focusing on that growth of their business instead of moving into another program. Or you want to create a value chain within the support structure that allows a business to go from one level of support to the next level of support. And I think that's where we see some of the bad behaviors in the market, and we're not seeing the growth. I think that the next thing is also to look at the accountability of impact of support programs or incubators. You want to make sure that there is a framework in place around monitoring and evaluation. And I think Mpumi is also really keen on that process.
Yeah. I mean, Mpumi, just on your end, I think some of the things that Hilton is raising is that one would think there are many pain points across the entire process. Talk to us about some of the things that you've seen there. And also, some people are suggesting maybe we have too many of these incubators. I mean, there's incubators in the private sector, there's incubators in the public sector, all ideally doing the same kinds of work. Do we find the same issue in the agricultural sector as well?
In all the sectors. So I would say the entire ecosystem is fragmented. And I'm going to first look at the SMMEs that are looking for the support first, to say that we don't have a culture of taking ourselves as a business serious. So firstly, if you are a small business and you are looking to grow your business to becoming a sustainable business, there should be check and balances that you have in place for Pinpoint or anyone else that is providing incubation services to be able to look at you. And so I'll call that like a frequent flyer program. If you're a frequent flyer, you have less anxiousness because you know exactly this is what is expected of me as a small business. But small business treat themselves as casual flyers. So every time they need support, they have to scratch, oh my word, oh, what else do I need? What else do I need? Whereas you should just be able to say, oh, I have all of that, what else do you need? And then you're adding one thing. So for me, that's the education and the emphasis needs to go towards talking to our SMMEs to say, how to become a frequent flyer into the program.
Comfortable with the kind of needs that you have as a business,
Exactly. Get those fundamentals right. Shifting to the incubators need to be very clear around their intention of transforming and growing that SMME that they are incubating. So when you come in as A and you leave as Z, and this would have been your journey. It's not clear how that is being achieved. Most of the time it's aligned to sometimes who the back of the funder, if the funder has defined their parameters to say we can only fund this program for 3 months. Whether it makes sense for the SMME who's going to be supported to only be supported for 3 months or not, this is the biggest question that we actually need to pose back to our grant funders, to our equity funders, to say actually, as Meta expects, it takes 3 years. We've seen it. This is the results you've seen. So if you're giving us anything less than that, we're not going to create a sustainable business.
So, I mean, just judging from what you're saying, it's quite clear that it's also a bit unclear within the ecosystem what success would look like. Because surely, even if I as a funder have my own priorities that I want to come through in how the incubation project is designed, but there should be some form of idea as a society that if we place you in an incubator, we want your turnover to improve by X amount, we want your systems to improve, and we have that in a very clearly defined manner. Are you finding that, I guess, maybe we're chasing different goalposts here?
Yes, definitely. We are all chasing different things, and I guess it will be upon the industry to try and really define some of these very fundamental questions around the incubation. So whether you are an accelerator program, other people call them that, themselves that, whether you're an incubation program, whether it's a supplier, an enterprise development program, if it's a corporate-led, it should be very clear around what is the pull-through put of what we are trying to do with our SMMEs. And in the process, a lot of funds get wasted. In the process, a lot of SMMEs are stagnant and are not growing. at the level that they would, because we've not defined it clearly. What are we trying to achieve?
Shawn, you guys put together some really interesting impact reports here.
Yes.
And I'd be interested, just as you respond to what Mpumi is raising, to also maybe talk us through some of the metrics you chase that say, look, success looks like this, and we think we've hit that, we haven't been able to maybe hit the other.
So I think even to preempt that, one of the key factors for us was to look at, what are some of the challenges in the market? So typically, there's no standardization in terms of impact or even indicators of success within the market. And I think, for me, one of the challenges with that is the fact that a lot of our legislation that governs the incubator sector within South Africa actually comes from our BE code. So typically, enterprise and supply development funding goes into supporting these ventures. So if we look at how the codes are written, it's written with an input perspective. So how much money is people spending versus what are they getting out? So that's one of the challenges. Secondly, there needs to be a level of accountability. Both accountability of the operators, so incubators in the market, but also funders. So we have billions of rands going into the support of small business, but we're not seeing that churned out in terms of economic growth and job creation. So from our perspective, we recently did a macroeconomic study, and what we wanted to look at was that if we are investing in the support of small businesses through Property Point, what has that contribution been back to South Africa Inc.? So what has that been back to the economy? And for us, the indicators that we wanted to look at was firstly from a national economic growth perspective, what was our contribution to GDP? So through our work, we've contributed 1.6 billion to GDP. So small businesses that have gone through our program. So within that study, we had looked at about 130 small businesses that have gone through the program. To date, we're supporting about over 200 businesses. Okay. We then also looked at market access opportunities. So how have we converted opportunities in the market? What's the rands and cents back in the banks for small businesses? That value came up to 1.2 billion. So that was businesses that have been knocking on an opportunity door prior to coming onto our program and that have not been able to access that. We also were able to do a control group study in terms of businesses that were not on our program versus ones that have come through the program, and looking at their growth rate. So 1 year post-intervention, so 1 year within the incubation program, we had a revenue growth rate of 78%, which is phenomenal in terms of global standards. But we also then looked at 2 years post-graduation. So if a business has been on the program for 2 years and they graduated and they go into an alumni program, on average, your revenue growth rate was about 39%. Jobs created, we had our jobs created, indirect and direct job creation was over 2,500. But more importantly, we also wanted to look at the return on investment. And this is part of the accountability to a funder. So for every 1 rand invested into Property Point, our return was 14.20 rand in terms of the return, and that figure we looked at the contribution to GDP, job creation, and the social return. Creates accountability in the marketplace in terms of what we need to be able to do with small business.
I want us to pause there for a second, Shawn. We need to quickly take a break. But when we come back, we'll continue just on this issue of the accountability flow. I mean, I heard Mpumi raising the issue of some of the equity funders here, some of their own expectations, and also the metrics that you are developing. And I guess the whole idea is to make sure that everybody's batting on the same wicket, and everybody's chasing the same goalposts, so that you don't have, the money going to waste, as Mpumi was suggesting earlier on. So we'll take a quick break now. And when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation. Send us some of the questions you might have, or you can tweet us on our handle on @405business_. Also send us your comments on WhatsApp. And our number there is 072-110-5584, 072-110-5584. We continue on the other side of this break.